Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name's Brian Cabral. I'm an engineering director at Oculus and Facebook. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time introducing the next generation of immersive storytelling in 6DoF. As you saw earlier, we're in the business of defying distance, bringing faraway things closer to you to connect with people and experiences. And we believe that one of the ways we're going to do that is through capture, live action capture. And we've been on this journey a little while now, almost as long as Oculus has been in operation. And we started with our open source camera, where we wanted to start to explore that space with all of you. This has always been an exercise about working with each and every one of you to build something cool and great. We went on from that to build an even richer experience. Instead of just stereoscopic omni-stereo, we wanted to actually surround you with a 3D experience. So we experimented with cameras in a full ball. Last April, we announced a partnership and collaboration with Red Digital Cinema. And we gave you a sneak preview of what that might look like. And today, I'm here and super happy to unveil the results of that partnership and collaboration. We're going to, out on the show floor, if you haven't been out there, is an actual running next generation 6DoF capture device called Manifold. It's really quite amazing, technically. We shot for the moon because we wanted to give each of you, the creators and developers, the ultimate device and tool. Its technical specifications are impressive. It contains 16 red helium sensors, each capable of 60 FPS. We had custom Schneider optics, fisheye optics, built particularly for VR capture. If you go up to the booth, you can look at the live capture that's happening and see how sharp the images are. And that's quite intentional in order to capture every detail and then reconstruct it. There were 16 cameras because we wanted full 360 overlap. We have 4x overlap in all areas and up on average 7. In order to make it easy to use, we thought deeply and learned from all of you and many of our panelists about the difficulties of shooting in real situations. And that meant live constant preview of all the cameras and any camera you want. We wanted the connectors to be standard on-set SMPTE and SDI cables that are ruggedized. We wanted the device itself to be super reliable, so when your data got recorded, it gets recorded. Now, all of these things seem like obvious camera things, but if any of you have ever built your own rig and have done any of this stuff yourself, you know how hard this is, and basically, it doesn't work half the time. We wanted to eliminate that to create a richer and better tool for you. We also thought about accessories, like neutral density filters. Now, how do you do that with a 360 camera? That was built in so that we could have attachable neutral density filters. We also wanted an easy way to actually handle the device because it's round. You just can't grab it. You're going to grab the lenses. How do you do that? We have specialized handles. There are mount points on this that allow for the ability to hold the weight of the camera at multiple points on the camera. There's also all of those little red dots actually allow you to mount other accessories like wiring and lighting. All of this was very much thought through. The entire system is controlled, its power and its data, through a single SMPTE 304mm cable. And that cable's about as thick as my little finger. It is there. You can go up to the booth, you can see it, and that's the only connection to the camera. And that cable can run 100 meters. And that is amazing, folks. If you've ever shot on set, this is an amazingly freeing constraint of removing the cable headache that every single VR producer and DT and cinematographer has to go through. So, this just is something of great engineering feat. I would say I've probably built, over the last 40 years of engineering, many pretty amazing devices. The first GPU, one of the first 3D graphics engines at SGI. This is by far the most technically innovative, hardest, and most complicated thing I've been involved with. And it's a tribute to the red team who built it and all the people who have given us feedback, and all of you. So you should really be proud of yourself, because this is what the last 5 years has produced. And it launches us for the next 5 years. That cable I mentioned is really heavy duty. It's designed to be removed and put back in. But all the connectors have been thought through so that it can withstand this handling on set. I call it the first professional set-ready camera ever built. And I don't think that's a stretch, after working with quite a few cameras. But of course, as you all know, the camera is just the start of it. That is an important part of the tool chain. And you start with capture, and then you have to actually do something with that data. And we've partnered with our various partners, which we discussed last time. Those partners are still with us, and now we're giving them an additional tool and a lot more data to work with. They're going to love us. They're going to keep their farms very busy. With all of this is this workflow that is really designed to integrate into existing tool chains. So building depth maps, building point clouds, using those tools so that you can actually do something in post-production. Because no matter how good our depth estimation is, it makes mistakes. You've got to do post work. You also want to add interesting effects. So you have to be integrated into a workflow. This is all very interesting, but we actually went out with one of the early alpha units and did a shoot. And we wanted to illustrate what you can do with a camera like this. This is a standard eco-rect image. Many of you are familiar, no stitched lines, but we're going to zoom in. This is all part of a single take, and all of this is without the camera moving. This is from a single camera shot, and the video is the video off the camera. We didn't fake that. We did do a little bit of post to do a little bit of cleanup. So the whole idea is now we virtualize this camera. We can put you in a headset and do this, or you can do interesting post effects. And I think it's pretty amazing. I really, really think. And the color quality and the grading on all of that, is possible when you are using reds as your data source. That video is playing in the booth as well, so you can get up close and scrutinize it and look at it and ask any of us questions. But we want to spend most of the rest of this session with our panelists, because as far as we've come, we in fact have a ton more work, and there are still a boatload of challenges we have in front of us. And here to moderate is Andrew. He's going to lead us in a discussion and arm wrestle about all the hard problems left. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Switch seats.
Yeah, we'll switch.
Thank you, Brian. I have some prepared notes. I sort of wanted to set the context for why this is such a groundbreaking achievement. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with this esteemed group for a variety of reasons. But I wanted to first kind of say, for those of us that have a foot in the motion picture and advertising business and another foot in the immersive business, this is such a watershed moment that I've personally been waiting years for. You have a leading cinema camera company whose groundbreaking products have been used to capture most of the traditional filmed entertainment that you see in theaters, TV, and streaming. Working collaboratively with a groundbreaking social platform that hosts most of the consumer engagement and advertising traffic on the internet, linking the world in ways never before seen. And today, both are working together to create this groundbreaking imaging product that isn't about VR or about AR or even about the future of immersive entertainment, but it's writing the code for the future of content and how we will engage with it. Red has been, I don't think it's a dramatic statement to say, as disruptive a force in the motion picture business as Oculus has been to gaming. But neither company has been satisfied to leave it there. Both are playing this foundational role now in the converging transmedia market that is defining this era of acceleration. So as the verticals of filmed entertainment and gaming and esports and live events and news and politics and e-commerce and everything else are colliding, we're seeing this new hybrid form of experiential media emerge. And that marries the heritage of storytelling with user activity and global micro-relevance. Distributed on a massive scale and powered by users themselves, Oculus is fueling an interactive future that allows the audience to play an active role in their experience, creating something both more personal and also more broadly relevant at the same time. But for anyone to develop and photograph immersive content at this level without disappointing investors has been no easy feat. And on a technical level, it's Sisyphean. I can say this from very serious personal experience. To custom fit multiple cameras with wide-angle fields of view into as small array as possible leaves ambitious engineers no choice but to use inexpensive cameras with poor dynamic range, heavy compression, low-quality glass. Volumetric capture and 6-stop delivery presents exponentially more challenges, which is the genius of this system. And with the might of engineering in this professional partnership, we're finally seeing robust tools for achieving, in a live-action space, the interaction that we've had in gaming and meeting the growing demands of this colossal new market. We're entering this new era where viewers become users and demand more from content than a passive observational experience. This new era requires some new tools, not so disconnected from those that we knew. In fact, supported with the same modular infrastructure and even the familiar brand logos, but with enhanced functionality. And I think there's perhaps no better way to equip ourselves for the future than with tools made by those that forged it. So I want to open up our panel now and speak with this esteemed group. Brian, it's an amazing feat of engineering. We've talked about that. But what specifically is it that kind of went into building a camera like this?
Trying a lot of trial and error, right? I think there's 2 or 3 things. One is building a whole bunch of cameras. We didn't start out here, right? Second was partnering with someone who knew how to build a camera. Like, we had a lot of internal discussions, and there was no discussion like, we're going to build this by ourselves. Like, you have to work with people that know how to build cameras. And then the last is you have to have on-set experience. Like, you have to work with people like Kate. Like, you have to know the pain, if you will. And we wouldn't be here without those, I think, 3 elements.
Uday, what makes this attractive to Facebook? What makes this attractive to Red, partnering with Facebook in this way?
I think what made it attractive for Red is that we had seen our customers engaging in these types of shoots. And it's, as you mentioned, a basically impossible task to get everything right. Beyond handling the positioning of sensors, you have to deal with 50 to 80 cables. And if any one thing goes wrong, you deteriorate the quality of your product. When Brian came to us with this proposal, we were skeptical. And after a trip up here and after seeing how we fit into a broader ecosystem that Facebook was building, not just at capture, but with post-production and distribution, it became clear that we could offer a part of technology that would make this a more stable platform upon which to build VR and other types of experiences.
Kate, you have been through the mill with this kind of capture before. We've been through it together in some projects. What are the biggest pain points that go down in your book when dealing with both spherical capture and this kind of volumetric stuff?
I think what we've been lacking so far is basic functionality and user interface that we experience with more professional cameras that we're used to in traditional cinematography. So we usually, there's consumer cameras that are available that will record at the push of a button, but you sacrifice image. So we resort to these homemade rigs, and we shove multiple sensors together, and we deal with 80 cables and poor heat dissipation. And there's no one interface that lets you change all the settings at once. And it seems like a minor detail, but it really adds up. That and the ability to actually view what you're shooting. You can't have an ASC cinematographer on set, give them a list of demands, and then say, oh, and you're going to have to view this through a witness camera. Like, it's just not acceptable, and you won't have professional cinematographers wanting to return to this immersive medium.
I think it also, not just cinematographers, but also, the creative team at Nike isn't going to sit there waiting when they have, whoever the star is for 2 hours. How does this device and what it can achieve fit into the goals of Facebook from a social perspective?
So we see, as you heard this morning, for those of you who went to the keynotes, we have this vision of teleportation, effectively, of connecting people through experiences. And we do that through medium, through capturing medium, whether it's a single photograph or something more immersive. So it's not only good enough for us to render a 3D scene, we actually have to capture it. Our goal is to be able to transport people to different events, places, and emotions, both in the past and concurrently in time. So it's right there in the middle of what we're trying to do. You can't imagine what we're doing without eventually it having a capture system like this. And whether it's at the high end or the low end, it's got to start somewhere. And it starts, in my mind, with the creative forces, right? The creative people who teach each of us how to even shoot your own home videos. I tell this story that on average, you see 300,000 to 400,000 photos every year. That means you have the rule of thirds built into your brain, whether you know it or not. Now, you didn't learn that because you went to photography school. You learned it by seeing hundreds of thousands, millions of professional images. Those professionals have taught you how to shoot a average decent picture. And you cannot underestimate the value of looking at professional cinematography and professional media to inform how you're going to do it, in every day. So it has huge import.
That's a really smart way of putting it. I've never thought of it that way before. And I think that's something that I particularly feel connected to, and I think ties in with the mission, is quality. And what you said a second ago about having high end and middle range, maybe not low end, I don't know, but the idea that those two sectors are using the same tools and conditioning through that social exposure is interesting. How do you think, Uday, this camera and this technology changes how we experience content?
So I think the change is going to be built on the innovation that happens on top of this camera system. By making a stable foundation for capture and multi-sensor capture, this camera should enable filmmakers to take more risk on the actual creation of the content and not worry about the AD cables and the thermal ducting. So what our hope is that this enables new types of experiences and also becomes another paintbrush for normal experiences. That one of the things that initially drew us to this project was this idea of virtual green screens, that you can get away from having a chroma key replacement of a background and do it depth-based. So for the traditional cinematographer, it's a whole new type of tool that they can use, and while also enabling a new type of experience.
Right, I like the idea of using this tool as something that isn't just about shooting 360s. It has a million purposes. We've been through, Kate, together, like some of the pain points of how we work with an on-set ready tool. And like you described, when you press a button, it just works. How does this camera, in what we've seen so far, help to solve those issues?
A million ways. I mean, down to basic exposure tools. Actually, having the ability to expose for a professional sensor is a huge deal. Also, just media management, media storage, knowing that all your media will be there when you go to do the reconstruction, and you have these ready-to-use depth maps after.
I think the four of us all kind of occupy this space where you have to have something that works, and it's easy for an event like this to be something we kind of laud all the amazing things about it. It's so revolutionary to me, it's so exciting to talk about, but what do you think of the market challenges with having a product like this coming out in this time, in this market, in this moment? Maybe Uday.
Oh, that it's just one piece of a very large puzzle. It's basically, what we always thought of this as basically a stable foundation upon which to build. And there's so much more that has to go into making a compelling VR delivery and this teleportation and this new type of experience. So getting the basics down, getting the data managed, getting the power managed, I think this is only the first step in immersive capture.
Kate, what do you think of the market challenges of something like this, a tool like this?
Obviously, this won't be marketed towards the same people that are buying the simple 2-sensor cameras, but this will open up. It gives professional filmmakers a new tool to rely on. I think it'll draw more people in because it makes it more accessible. You're used to using these really high-end cameras, and you can finally give these filmmakers that high-end camera, and they can experiment with it and kind of learn to express themselves in this new media.
Right.
You know, I think it's necessary but not sufficient, to use a fancy mathematical term, right? You need it. You need basic tools that work well. From there, you can grow the market. People ask me internally, externally, well, how do you know when it's successful? How many units, or all these? I said none of that matters. I'll know when it's successful when people start using this tool in ways that I go, wow, like you did that with it. And that's been my experience with all the things I've worked on that have been truly revolutionary, whether it's been the reality engines at SGI that cost $150,000 at the time, and like, how do you know it's successful when the medical doctors are saving people's lives with it? With the first GPU we worked on at NVIDIA, how did I know it was successful? Is when people started doing computation with it that wasn't graphics. And now it's de rigueur. Everybody uses them for AI. This will be the same thing. We're going to start to see people doing interesting capture, not just for VR, blending it with computer graphics, capturing scenes, and you just be de rigueur. Of course, you'll bring 1 or 2 of these into a set. You just capture everything. Right. And we'll make VR assets, we'll make AR assets, we'll make 2D assets, but let's just capture it because everything on set is expensive, and we'll figure it out later. And that will unleash a ton of creativity that I have, that I am not equipped even to do or almost think about. And that's when I know I can, move on to the next thing, like the next moonshot. Right. My job will be done.
I mean, I think the exciting thing about these the exciting thing about this product is that it's born out of necessity. It's born out of like, how do we deliver something that is X, as opposed to, hey, how can we hit this target, or how can we kind of like come out with version 3 of something? So I think that's particularly exciting. How do you think, Kate, how do you think that production and post-production, the overlap of those two kind of what used to be very standard phases of production have changed? Using this tool or others? Like, how do those two overlap in your world?
Well, with Sixtoff, we really have to kind of marry post, pre, and production together a lot earlier in the game. You get, like, every little piece matters, from wardrobe to lighting. You can't capture the same type of clothing that will reconstruct perfectly necessarily. So it's a lot more testing. It's a lot more planning every shot. But if you have a tool that you know works, you can actually use that to experiment, to figure out, oh, they can't wear this, or oh, this blocking isn't as effective as a narrative tool. So you really have to look at it more as a big picture.
How do you think, my mind spins when we shot with it in LA. I had such a, immediately your mind goes to all the different ways that we use it in this space, but also just on a traditional movie or on a traditional commercial. And we've talked about this before. But Uday, we haven't really talked about it, and I wonder how you see using this outside of the kind of VR 360 space.
I think those are the areas where we're most excited about today. And if you get a chance to stop by the booth, there's a great demo using this ball to basically reframe, move, all in post. So it takes the obligation of capture and sort of lessens the load of what has to happen on set and gives creative flexibility to post-production. And beyond that, there are the other applications of virtual green screen and VFX capture and plates capture that I think are right now will still be the main applications of this until the rest of the ecosystem develops. And what we see more often than not is that the types of things that you're showing in your video are what our customers are looking for. So,
right, Brian, what do you think about other ways that this is being used besides what we've already talked about?
You never know where people are going to take this, but it is very interesting. People are capturing 3D spaces kind of regularly, and have been with like laser scanners and those sorts of devices. But those are still images. And what we're doing that's fundamentally different and fundamentally a lot harder is doing it with a video. And what you'd like to do is scan the room with a laser scanner. Then you put this camera in there and then record, and all the data just works together. The point clouds that come out of the camera match the point clouds in that you've captured with a Faro or a Leica. They all are on the same scale. They're metrically correct. You don't have to worry about calibration, something we haven't talked about, but is super important in this space. You'd like to know that thing's 3 meters away, and that's super important for CG post-production. So you can imagine people scanning, using this almost like a scanner in conjunction with static scanners. And that's not a crazy idea. Right? Now you start to have 3D scanning in motion. So that, I could see all sorts of applications.
You're just talking about the alignment. What does it look like taking this camera out relative to just taking a single red out? What's the on-set workflow look like?
Well, others should be maybe more.
I just mean with this specific case. I know we've played with it.
Yeah, I think the first goal, and Kate touched upon this, is that there, as you well know, and anybody shot with a system like this, the understanding of what's going to happen in post-production while you're shooting is critical. And if you can't get visualizations of that quick, you're going to be in a world of hurt in post-production. And what this camera does is allow you to start looking at that data really quickly. For instance, as you mentioned, wardrobe. Is the person wearing the same color as the background is going to blend into it. Mm-hmm. We had one shoot where we had instructed the director, nothing shiny, nothing frilly, nothing like that. The art director decided that the person should wear a pom-pom dress that is silver. And they said, can you work with this? And I go, no. Like, what do you mean? And that was an easy one, but you often get into much more subtle ones. Another subtle one is there's a whole bunch of new jobs that'll be created in Hollywood with cameras like this. Like, if you scan a scene and then you put this camera in, you have to make sure that things don't move in the scene. Certain props and backgrounds you want fixed, and you'll have to have fixers whose job it'll be to run around the set. Don't move that. You move that 2 inches, we'll have to reshoot it. And the unions will be happy with it.
I was going to say, unions are going to love that.
But I mean, there are a bunch of these things. One of my favorite stories from one of the shoots from a long time ago was the puller. For those who don't know, a puller is the person who controls the focus on a camera, usually follows the cameraman around and keeps the thing in focus. I saw this camera and felt devastated. Like, oh my God, I've lost my job. And he was really kind of pissy about it because he's a union guy. Like, what am I? And I thought about 5 seconds. I said, no problem. I said, between every take, your job is to remove every speck of dust off of this thing and make sure it hasn't moved. And he was ecstatic because there were like dozens of cameras and like, oh my God, I've just like quadrupled my job. So I think what that means is that there will be a whole bunch of on-set work that is just going to be different, just like we have lighting and blocking that is very 2D. And anybody who has done cinematography knows this, but go and look at a glossary of cinematography, and well over half the glossary terms are 2D, very 2D. Things come in left and right and blocking and squaring and blah, blah, blah. You'll have a whole new vocabulary that you'll invent for us.
Well, one of the cool things I think is that you've been really sensitive to how people are going to use the camera, as opposed to just kind of pushing something out there that gets used in some ways because it has to fit into an existing architecture. And red is the same way, if I can bring it around for a minute, because I think that when I think of shooting stereo, which I think is what this camera really makes the case for, I think there's always kind of in this VR space, like, is stereo a thing? Is 3D worthwhile? This sort of makes the case like, depth is a thing. It's key. I know you have some specific thoughts about depth. Kate, what do you think about stereo, 3D, not 3D?
I love 3D, not from a practical standpoint, of course, but I think when you move away from using traditional lenses, that's normally how we focus the eye in cinematography, right? We're very into our lenses. And once you lose that, once we're shooting everything on 180 lenses, I mean, that's rough at first as a tool to lose. But when you introduce depth, it's a new way to compose frames. It's a new way to move focus around the frame. And it's equivalent to focus pulling, right? It's, as someone that started out as a focus puller, I feel very strongly about that job. It still will exist. It'll just be in a different format. It'll be using depth and stereo to direct the scene.
Uday, well, I want to ask one last question, then we'll open up for questions. And when we do, I think there's some microphones here and here if you guys want to line up. Last kind of formal question is, Uday, you guys are sort of famous for breaking the mold and really thinking about a traditional business in a brand new way, which is, I think, why Red has been as disruptive as it has. Do you feel like there are things within your existing kind of Red vertical that will change based on this collaboration?
I think it's going to drive change throughout the industry. For our traditional vertical, which is based on this idea of a single lens capture, this is an additional tool for that cinematographer to create a new type of image, to compose the frame a different way. The place where we see this fitting in is currently alongside a traditional camera that'll be used to basically take a whole different type of view of the scene that can be massaged and adjusted in post. And over time, it'll, I think, evolve. But as we see it today, it's kind of an alongside type of camera. And the traditional camera still exists on set for some of these creative lensing opportunities that you get with that.
Right. Seems like probably also a very active thing for visual effects.
Yes.
All right, maybe we'll just ping pong from one to the other. Go ahead.
Hi, Avinash from We Make VR here. We've been shooting with our own Red Dragon setups for the last 4 years, so we're really happy with this camera. Question, I think for Kate. So when we have when we now have 6 DOF, we give freedom to the user, but we've been training actors to make eye contact with the users in our VR experiences. So now we give them freedom, the users, but they can break eye contact by stepping away since they have 6 DOF. So what we saw in the Blade Runner 2049 experience with volumetric capture, the moment the user steps aside, breaks the line of sight with the virtual actor, you break your suspension of disbelief. Now, how do we deal with that problem in 6 DOF?
Eye contact is a huge issue. It always has been. In the future, you will have the ability to hopefully rotate your character to continuously make eye contact with the subject, and obviously we don't have that yet. So that's kind of where, honestly, rehearsals and preview come in really usefully. And it's a case-by-case scenario. You have to decide who the camera is as a subject, who's the viewer, and what sort of contact and personal contact you have to make with the actors to get your point across. And then based on that, play with the blocking. Sometimes body language can actually convey a lot more than you realize, as well as placing eye contact a little further away than you would think. And it's tweaking for sure. If you can, get a couple test shots in, get those in headset, and see how it makes you feel. Because ultimately, we're still inventing those rules.
Follow-up question? I have another question on stereo depth budget. If you now shoot with stereo rigs, we have a stereo puller to pull, to either do toe-in or parallel to establish how much depth we play with. How do we deal with a stereo depth budget with this camera?
So we know where the head box is. We know kind of exactly where the minimum distance is, so we can budget that. We also know what the farthest is, and it's quite far. We shot an experimental piece last spring, and we could see depth out to mountains behind a barn. So that's a pretty good depth budget. The depth budget is also related to S&R of the sensor, how good the sensor is. And we brought this up at F8, and I think that goes here. The higher quality pixels you have, the better your reconstruction and your depth. So baseline, head box, and pixel quality really drive your depth budget. This camera has a lot of both. So you're going to have a budget that's much, much bigger than you have had on past rigs.
I just want to add, tack on something to what you were asking. As you're looking at what eye contact looks like, I think we are kind of thinking about content differently, that in some cases you're not going to be able to have eye contact with everyone at this moment. Eventually there'll be some rendering where you can kind of find it, but there's also something kind of amazing about being out of that eye line and coming back into it, and the fulfillment of that being interactive. That's its own level of interaction, I think, for a user.
Hello, I'm Michael Connolly from Blackthorn Media. I'm curious about you guys have a terrific homework assignment here in this sort of idealized way of eliminating distance, letting people, teleport, so to speak. And going about that from the standpoint of what's the best possible volumetric capture that we can achieve is a wonderful starting point, and obviously begs a lot of questions about what the end user, commercial, present day end user experience is going to look like. So for instance, the Lytro guys had a hard time sort of funneling all the data they were generating in a way that was useful to an end user experience that preserved a reasonable amount of the fidelity that their camera was capturing. I gather this is all not quite in consumer hands. I wonder how close you are to producing a viable example of here's this spectacular capture device. Here's how close we are to somebody's putting on a Rift and experiencing all this great stuff in their home as a consumer.
I think that we're partway on that journey, right? We've just created the content creation tool. So if you look at I'll call it the gestation period between this coming out and then getting that content fully manifested in a headset, it might be 3 years, 4 years by the time creators get it, try it, iterate, and where it's de rigueur that you can just do this in a headset. So I don't want to oversell like, oh, we've solved the problems, we're done. We're just starting, and we're taking the next important step. So this is kind of a beginning, not an end. And I think that's really important to underscore, is that we've been on this journey, and now we have a professional device. That's a starting point, not an ending point.
Yeah, reliable is the baseline.
Yeah, yes. So it's a ways out, I think, honestly.
Hi. The addition of 6DoF with the new device seems like a real foot in the door to opening up more interactive options for filmmakers. And at the same time, there's this convergence going on between VR tracking systems used in filmmaking, robotic filmmaking, that kind of thing. Where's the end game for the pipeline in terms of integrating dynamic lighting, interactive components for viewers and users with your capture methods? What's the dream here?
One of you want to take it?
The dream? The ultimate dream is I plop down 2 of these cameras somewhere in the jungle, take a few frames, bring it back, and relight the whole thing later and put some actors in. I mean, I think that's the ultimate dream. In the timeline, like you said, we're at the very beginning of that. What's your dream for this as a cinematographer?
I think there's a million different, it kind of depends on the project. It kind of feels like everything, the beauty of it is that it's kind of the ultimate versatile tool. And I think conversations we've had, I can see a version where you can push out a ton of different deliverables, both to a Rift or a Go or a Quest or to a Vive and to all these different products, and also to a phone and to a theater and to an airplane and to my iPad. And so I can start to see a waterfall of deliverables that are all relevant and all feel like I'm not missing the shot, shot in all these different ways. So I think it really depends on what the material is. But I think it's a tool that's super robust and has the dynamic range that we've been waiting for 5 years for.
And a little bit of underscore something here with relighting. There's a bunch of interesting software that has yet to be written to make relighting really a reality with this camera. So let me inspire people here to write some fun code over the weekend. Since it's a ball, it captures the entire environment. It means you have the environmental lighting at the same time, roughly where your characters are. Now, I can envision writing a piece of software that would know the lighting and what you saw in 3D and undo it. Now, I'm waving my hands a lot here because that's a really hard technical and math problem, so it's not trivial. But I'm seeding an idea here. Maybe somebody will go home and start to write it. But it does hold that potential. But it is potential. It's not like I've written that code and it just works. There's a lot of hard, nasty physics problems you have to work out in that. But I do see that happening.
I think that's extremely vital that we don't really talk about enough, that this whole world is really about capturing something, and you need a minimum level of exposure so that you can see the scene, but ultimately you're going to have to relight it and talk about a new role. I mean, that's something that the cinematographer or shaders or whoever will have to be involved much later down the process to make sure that it still looks the way you want it to look.
Hi, my name's Tom Hall, and I'm a former, still kind of working stereographer. I've been dabbling in volumetric filmmaking and union focus puller. And I'm asking, the current state of the system, is it yet ready to have the crap kicked out of it like an IMAX camera? Like, can it be dragged across, the Hillary's step or across the Amazon, or is it still very much a studio, carefully controlled system?
Let me, I'll answer it, and then Uday can correct me. We did take into a lot of consideration during this design, probably more than any camera I've been involved with, on ruggedization. That was taken deeply into consideration. Can it hook up to a helicopter? Can you strap it to a car? Now, there's limits. If you go out on the show floor, it's not a small camera, so just hauling it to a jungle may be tricky. But we do anticipate people using it in real world conditions. So maybe you want to touch on
It's designed to take outside the studio. I mean, we've always focused on building a rugged camera, something that can be rigged and taken where the shot exists rather than bringing the shot into the studio. Especially for this type of application where it's about capturing the whole world, it has to get outside of the studio. So it's rugged. We have a very limited quantity right now, so I don't want to drag it through the desert yet, but maybe when we have some more, we'd take that risk.
Yeah, but that was taken deeply into consideration. We've all been on set enough to know these cameras get the heck kicked out of them, and we really designed it for being as rugged as we could make it and still not be 10,000 pounds.
In fairness, I mean, I don't remember the last job that I did where it was like, is there a camera that works for exactly this purpose that we're doing? We're always like doing some kind of edge thing and doing something that pushes the envelope, and I think that's why you do it.
Mm-hmm. It was taken into consideration. It was deeply considered.
So you'd say from a scale of like Solito to MSM, it's probably not like pulling around a 300-pound gorilla.
We're not talking about weight yet. It's a sensitive topic. But it is designed to be handheld, and one of the things you'll see in the booth is the handheld rig for it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for talking about this. I appreciate it. My name is Luis Flores, and I have some real-world situation questions. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit, Uday, on what we're doing, or you're doing to overcome the, in a real situation where you have 16 cameras and we're shooting, let's say, 1 terabyte, so we have 16 terabytes on stuff we may not even use. Are there any discussions or anything you guys are doing to deal with, I mean, even if you go to a compression code like 22:1, we're still gonna go through so much data, and how do you deal with so much data in a pipeline to keep it realistic in the budgets so we have an industry as opposed to, and I like the one-offs, I'm happy Facebook puts the money behind it and Google has a Google amount of money for this, but in a real world situation where we want an industry, I'm looking at one-offs right now. And very few people can touch that. Very few creative people with out-of-the-box ideas can even get close to that. And are these cameras going to be in your YouTube spaces only, or what are the discussions or anything you can share with on when it does get deployed? Is this just going to sit at Radiant, or is this going to be something people rent from Facebook? What is the real situational accessibility to the masses so we can have an industry and we can make some money?
So maybe we can start with how to wrangle data. If you take the traditional setups that people have done using our cameras, they take 10 to 20 discrete cameras, put 10 to 20 mags inside them, record footage, then offload it, and then finally it's sitting in a data center somewhere. We've tried to get rid of all the steps in the middle, and we have a single SMPTE cable coming out, recording directly into the data center. So the way that this is designed today is that it's fiber coming out, and it is an immense amount of data. We're talking about 16 8K cameras capturing at 60 hertz. So that immense amount of data is going directly into the data center. Now, that's not probably what you're looking for as I'm going to take it with me and get a small payload, but with this amount of pixels and this amount of I guess PPD in a whole sphere of capture, it necessitates a large amount of data. What we've tried to do is eliminate the complexity of data wrangling and make it a simpler experience. But that simpler experience will become more accessible over time as storage gets cheaper, as network attached storage gets cheaper, as fiber storage devices get cheaper. Today, it's still the realm of a data center type appliance.
And there's no reason why, we're going to record the raw data to make sure you get it, but doesn't mean that it'll make it a lot easier to downscale it, and let's say you want a lower resolution, you don't want to pump all that data around. We want to make it easier for you to do that. And this is the first step, not the last step. So once people see this, we're hoping like, oh, this is the way you have to do it. And these are the things. Instead of spending all your time, as you mentioned, taking mags, as you've probably done 1,000 times, oh, this is mag number 25, it goes here, I've lost this data. And it becomes such an effort that there is almost like a fatigue that sets in just managing all that. Once you eliminate that, then you move to your next problem. Should I compress it more? Should I downscale it because my application needs it? Because we've overshot, in a sense, for a number of applications. But once you've overshot, it's easy, of all the problems we've talked about, it's easy to downsize. But it's not when you're busy wrangling a ton of data.
Yeah, the aim was to simplify the capture experience.
So it's going to require a van, most likely. Is that realistic?
It'll require a rack. Yeah.
It'll require a rack, but not a van.
Also, I think if anyone's prepared to do it, it's RED. One of the things that I've been most impressed with lately is the fact that you can shoot RED 8:1 and can get a lower data rate than you store more footage than you can from an Alexa shoot.
Yeah, but even at 22:1, I mean, you're still going to eat up through.
It's a lot of data.
Yeah.
VR is a lot of data.
And forgive me, cloud point space data, getting it to the headset. What codec are you guys using for that amount of data?
So right now, the custom there, and that is another area where I encourage, especially the developers here that are headset developers. I think there's enormous amounts of room on what sort of representations you go from depth maps and images into the headset. Do you use point clouds? Do you recode them as light fields? Do you multiplanar imagery? I think those are all valid approaches. And again, we're at the beginning of this, not the end. I don't have the right answer for you, but I really want all of you to try, because I think out of trying, you will start to settle on what works in certain venues and use cases.
And just a note from a practical on-set standpoint, you're not going to shoot every take. This is almost like volumetric filmmaking is almost a return to filmmaking, where you have to count your mags, and everything is precise, and you want to hit your marks, and that's where the cooperation between all the departments comes in. It's a different approach to our typical oversampling of mini DV tapes or something like that.
And having a sensitivity to what the post implications are. Like, that's really kind of a new thing. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much. I want to thank the panel.
Thank you.
And thank everyone for having us. Thank you.